Curtis Yarvin is a huge has-been. You might remember that this guy was hailed as the, like, philosopher king of the tech right, the philosopher behind J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel, and he's this intellectual, and he's this dark enlightenment ideas, blah, blah, blah. And then he went to Twitter, and it turns out he's an idiot. Like, genuinely, he's not. He's just another, like, conservative. Just, he's not particularly bright at all. So he destroyed his mystique by moving to Twitter, and I think actually like shot himself in the foot for any future career prospects, because as long as he remained this shadowy behind the scenes figure, I think he could have kept that going for a while. But he put out a Substack post, which I think is kind of interesting. Man, look at these numbers, really performing well on Twitter. The second Trump revolution, like the first, is failing. It's failing because it deserves to fail. It is failing because it spends all its time patting itself on the back. It is failing because its true mission, which neither it nor, still less, its supporters understand. I love Sued writing, dude. I love this shit so much. You can tell when they got a little chub, typing the sentence out the way they did. Comma, which neither it nor, parentheses, still less, end parentheses, its supporters understand. Type shit. Word up. Is still as far beyond its reach as algebra is beyond a cat. Because the vengeance meted out after its failure will dwarf the vengeance after 2020, which was so significant. Because the successes of the second revolution are so much greater than the first. Because everyone involved with this revolution needs a plan B for 2029. And it is not even clear that it can wait until 2029. Losing the Congress, will instantly put the administration on the defensive. When you see clips of masked DHS goons hauling off some equally masked anarchist, you may be tempted to cheer. Don't. Yes, charges will be filed. No, it will not harm the anarchist. It will make his day, his year, maybe his life. All the money and power in the world will be at his defense. He will not even need to lift a finger to organize his own lawyers, much less pay them. In the end, as with many of the BLM rioters, he will probably be well compensated with taxpayer funds for his trouble. Not to mention all the pussy and/or dick she/he will, as a martyr, be entitled to. For the Islamist, this reward is only in heaven, but for the leftist, it comes on earth. I guess he's not wrong on that one. It always goes back to sexual insecurity for them. Where did that come from? I need you guys to understand that there was a multi-years long period where this guy was hailed as the intellectual titan behind the modern right. Like Trump represented the old right. He was heralding the neocons and bringing them over into fascism. And this guy was like the pioneer of a new era. Vosh, this is literally how you speak every day, by the way. Bold of you to say this within banning distance. A little bit. I don't try to, okay? Also, I don't have an editor. I'm speaking live. Is there a non-banning distance? Yeah, it's called YouTube chat, where I don't give a This is how you don't talk every day. Mods, mod that man. Of course, Bremer is absolutely right. But some corrections are in order. 1. There is no risk of a Republican one-party state because there is no actual Republican Party. It is a label, not a party. To the extent that the Republicans are organized, it is only for election theater. There is not even a remote, nascent equivalent of the venerable and gigantic progressive institutions which have been running our country for a century. Some people have some money, but would rather spend it on actually fun stuff. If you keep listening to the Dodd interview, he describes exactly how the Carnegie people took over the country in the first half of the 20th century. The playbook may work better on an innocent, defenseless nation, but it is still basically solid. By far the closest right-wing version of this is the Coe machine, but the Coes, like most right-wing Americans, are fundamentally interested in liberty, not power, and live in the thrall of centuries of bogus political science which has taught them that government can be, quote, limited, and power is not a zero-sum game. Unfortunately, though, it is. What is Blood waffling about? They control everything? Well, they're ingrates. Genuinely, this is what, like, no materialist analysis does to a motherfucker. You know how right-wingers complain about having no power, even though right now they objectively have all the power? Isn't it Coke, not Co? I've heard people say Co. If it's Coke, then Coke. I don't give a shit, okay? Maybe have Anglo names. F you. A lot of these people actually believe this stuff. I've said it before, but like the actual right-wingers don't actually know how power works, and they don't care much for politics. The fascists, at least. The fascists don't really care or know. What they want is the affirmation of cultural institutions, because to be affirmed is to be cool, and to be cool is to get pussy. And that would solve their problems. They don't actually care about who's the president or who's in Congress. They don't care about bills or laws. What they care about is like looking at ads on the TV and feeling their way of life and their beliefs affirmed to them in a way that makes them feel like they're in the in-group. It's the in-group, out-group distinction, but at the end of the day, for them, it's more about resolving like personal psychological grievance. They want sex? Yes, they want sex. Absolutely. It all comes down to sexual grievances. You know, the psychosexual trauma of not being cool. The thrill of power. This is why they're so obsessed with Hollywood, you know? Does it ever like seemed weird to you that Hollywood is such a target of obsession for these people, even though objectively speaking, all of the world's wealthiest and most powerful tech moguls are in line with the right? Like, they have Zuckerberg, they have Bezos, they have Musk. These people on their own are worth ungodly amounts of money. Collectively, they control most modern mass media. They're preposterously powerful, and they're fully in line with them. Musk is every day posting neo-Nazi shit. Zuckerberg and Bezos have been very publicly aligning themselves with the right. Not just them. I'm just listing like the big ones, you know? But they're still upset, you know? They're upset because the Super Bowl halftime show will feature Bad Bunny, right? They want the cultural affirmation. That's what they care about. It's not actually about like political power. You know, that's why they think they're always on the back foot. It never occurs to them they're just unlikable and have no good ideas and nobody wants to be with them or have sex with them because they're unlikable and don't have good ideas. They just want to be cool. Getting rid of all the liberal judges is easier than getting rid of one liberal judge. Easier than getting rid of all one liberal judge. Getting rid of all the judges is easier than getting rid of all the liberal Getting rid of all the judges is easier than getting rid of all the liberal judges. Getting rid of the whole legal system is easier than getting rid of all the judges. Getting rid of the whole machine of government is easier than getting rid of the whole legal system. Getting rid of the whole philosophy of government is easier than getting rid of the whole machine of government. How much of this do you think ChatGPT wrote? No, ChatGPT would write more coherently than this. It is not about dismantling political opposition. Politics is this establishment's outer line of defense. It is not their source of power or money. Winning elections does not create liberal power. It protects liberal power. If they lose elections, it is fine so long as their money and power is protected. While their power is feeling slightly annoyed, it is generally safe. Their money is completely safe. No one is even starting to talk about defunding their endowments, foundations, etc. In any case, even if these funds were taken, their billionaires would just refill them. They're billionaires. I love how far gone he is. He's absolutely insane. Like, there's no way, really, of being a fascist and being rational. But it's kind of like an interesting reveal on their priorities, right? So he feels like despair because he's concerned that the administration isn't going far enough to like really undo democracy. He's afraid that in 2029, a Democratic president is going to come around and met vengeance the likes of which the world has never seen, which is silly to think. I mean, in 2021, nothing happened after J6, but whatever. But the reason he thinks this is because there's actually no standard of power accumulation that could satisfy Curtis Yarvin, because again, successes in the government aren't enough for him, because he doesn't know what he wants, because none of them are willing to accept how petty their grievances are, how little they're actually clamoring for, a personal sense of satisfaction, you know? It's the midwit virus, you know? You have these people who think they're smarter than the lowest fascist. In reality, they're actually stupider. I think less of Curtis Yarvin than I do of any mid 80s IQ Appalachian Republican who thinks that blacks are a plague in this country, because at least they would be willing to acknowledge that they think race is the issue. They would be willing to celebrate petty acts of grievance against black people as a political victory, which it would be for him. But for Curtis Yarvin, it's not, because he's still plagued by that emptiness in his soul, the feeling that he has that he will never be cool. And that's what he's fighting for. I know a lot of people are really cynical about the country right now, but this is something that I keep pointing out, and I want everyone to believe it, okay? The Republicans are incredibly incompetent. They will not hold power forever. There need to be people to inherit the future. We have a good candidate to do so. Her name is actually Afton Bain. Batman name right there. Jesus Christ. There are Mamdanis everywhere for those with the eyes to see. She's talked directly with PV. She's very thankful for the help. Just saying, she's doing well. She's leading in the primary race right now. Tennessee 7, not exactly a robust Democratic stronghold. If she wins the primary, she'll be up against a Republican who is more likely than her to win. However, one of the biggest myths that we really need to break is the idea that the way to win in red states and red districts is by running moderates. I've never believed that's how it works. You know, you need to run people who are distinct from the Democratic Party. Well, folks, don't you want to participate in what might potentially be the flipping of a red district blue not only for a Democrat, but for a progressive Democrat that beats out the establishment candidates in the primary. I'm just saying, just sign up with PV, you know? She wants universal free school meals. I remember that. She's a Medicare for All fan. If we flip a House seat in a special election, nobody will have seen that coming. It would be nice not only because it would signal momentum before the midterms, but it would also be nice because it would signal that progressives are the people who need to be running in these districts, not moderate Democrats. At the end of this article, he talks about how he's planning to leave the country, to flee the country. And I'm not going through all of this. I'm just choosing the parts that he thought were special enough to put in the screenshot. I mean, look at this. Yes, there is the cancer, a horrid black blotch, growing. Everyone can see it now. Fox News will tell you all about the black blotch, but it's superficial. Stephen Miller will get it off with a belt sander, then Pam Bondi will dig into her makeup bag and find some concealer. It's fine, we're winning. It's great fan fiction, you know? My brothers in Christ, you cannot even imagine what winning looks like. This is literal. You literally can't picture it. You can picture winning on this, winning on that, winning on the other thing, but winning overall, you can't picture it because you can't handle the truth. Try anyway, then put yourself in that headspace and look back at the things the Trump administration is trying to do today. Unfortunately, I rather expect you'll laugh. Why does he sound like What If Alt Hist? They are literally the same guy. Exact same guy. Do you guys get at the point that I'm getting at here? The incoherence here, the fact that he can't assess what a political victory looks like because he's ultimately fighting an internal psychological war and everything else is meant to be. Like, I guess a good way of putting it is, in Nazi Germany, the Nazis succeeded absolutely in dismantling democracy. In that respect, in the respect that Curtis Yarvin wants here in America, the Nazis won. The Nazis dismantled the entire Weimar government. They didn't just get rid of liberal judges. The entire order was torn down and replaced by their own. They had absolute uncontested power. Not only were enemies of the state killed, sent to camps, whatever else, but every possible supplementary source of power they had internally, culture, academia, the judiciary, education, or sorry, I already said academia, all of them were completely taken over by the state and put in the hands of like party stooges and, autocrats and industrialists who were sympathetic to the party. Now, I ask you, at any point during all of that, were the Nazis satisfied? Exactly. Nor would they have been if they had won World War II and taken over the world. Of course not. It's a death ideology. It's a suicide cult, right? And Curtis Yarvin thinks that he's better than the average, low IQ Republican yucking it up and enjoying every superficial cultural victory because he fails to appreciate the fact that those superficial cultural victories are exactly what this is about. You're not fighting for the future of the world. You're fighting to burn it because you enjoy the heat. Like, there's no end game here. You could build literally any society and the fascist would still ruin it. The fascist could build the society and then would subsequently ruin it. It wouldn't matter. It doesn't matter. The point is the ruining. It's more of a process than a governmental style, right? That's one of the reasons I've always been more a fan of the 14 points of fascism than I have any of the quick and snappy definitions of a government, right? Governments can be authoritarian, but in my mind, rhetoric is fascist, you know? Right now, the Trump administration is fascist, not because the government itself is a fascist institution. It's not. We are still a democracy in how our government functions. The people are fascists, and they say fascist things, and they could continue to do that within a democracy, and that would effectively make it a fascist government, even if the institution is technically democratic. It's more a process than it is like an actual. There was a great write-up on this, and by a write-up I mean a long tweet from Cassie Pritchard. That's right. Banana cocaine. One of the best posters out there. Seriously. Good tweets. Now, I can't read all this. That's a lot of text. The one downside of this view of fascism is how many classic historically fascist governments, e.g. Franco's Spain, get reclassified as not actually fascist because they achieve stable governance for an extended period of time. Well, I would still argue that even if Franco's reign was relatively stable, and again, this is a relatively, the way he reigned was still fascist. The instability is not innately the fascistic part, right? There were points in time where Nazi Germany was internally stable before the war, and they were still fascist. It's more like it's the process by which you engage in governance. Though certainly, yeah, Franco was less of a, I don't know what you'd call, pure fascist than Hitler or Mussolini, which is probably why the government held up for as long as it did. Anyway, hold on. So this whole tweet right here, which is all completely true, but it's about this, okay? what an America of 100 million was like. Can we look at this for a second?
You're looking sharp. You're looking good.
Of course, it's copyright audio. This is a Gillette ad from the 90s or maybe the 80s. See this? This is the America of 100 million. What does that mean? If you got rid of all the blacks and the browns and Jews and so on, this is what would be left. Now, of course, when this ad was made, there were tons and tons of black and brown people and Jews and so on in America. It didn't really matter. You ever notice that like every right wing, it sure is white in here? That's the point. That's the point. You ever notice how every single right-wing like propaganda advertisement looks like this, where it's just made up of advertisements? The Department of Homeland Security literally posted something like this recently. It's hyper-reality, pure simulacrum type shit. No, I agree, but that's exactly, it's been disabled due to a report from a copyright owner. Your official Homeland Security, DHS Gov, Twitter, God damn it! I mean, I guess I'm in favor of it. I don't know. They've been doing this a lot. They did it with the Pokemon one. They did it with the Theo Von one. I'm trying to make a point here. Life after all the criminal aliens are deported. Can't play the audio, of course. We saw this. It's got the Nazi stuff in it. But like, overwhelmingly, the stuff in this is from movies and advertisements. You know? Overwhelmingly, that's what we're looking at here. It's like, what do we want the world to look like? Well, the Nazis' vision, the fascist vision of a good world, of a world they want to live in, is a collage of advertisements that reaffirm their worldview. They want to look at the television screen and see reflected back at them like their vision of a world that accepts them. You understand what I'm talking about? In other words, they don't have any vision for the future. They don't have any set of policies they believe in. They don't have any dream for how to make the country better. All they want to do, and this is why I always say nostalgia is a fascist impulse, all they want to do is return, in this case, not even to a real past, but to an imaginary one, to a collection of cherry-picked videos and images that make you feel a certain way. They're looking for a feeling here, you know? That's essentially what Cassie is talking about here. This is not quite effigy politics, but something worse. The far-right obsession with advertising is, on the other hand, removed from reality altogether. The fascist imagery is swamped with old advertising. Not even old film or TV, and certainly not old novels or music, come close to the total force that ads exert on their minds. They rage against modern inclusive advertisements. They yearn for the based advertisements of their youth or of generations past. The fertilizer of advertising runoff from screens and glossy pages, suffocating their brains with sludgy green blooms of fascist fantasy. See, Curtis, if you're watching this, that's purple prose that lands a little better. Here you go. What do you do with people like this? People who openly dream of removing around 240 million of their neighbors in order to restore a landscape of desire that isn't even and never was of their own making, but a landscape shaped decades ago by cynical hucksters working on Madison Avenue. How do you even begin to draw these people back into reality? They don't want reality. They want to dream, and they're violently angry at anyone who might disturb their sleep. Hold on, her writing is this fire? I wanted to talk about this because I felt like there was something kind of, there was like a funny parallel here a little bit. Curtis Yarvin was respected. Well, respected's a heavy word. Was recognized as like a right intellectual. Obviously, it turns out he's stupid. But he's doing the midwit failing here that I think really puts a lot of attention to the fundamental problem with these people's view of governance, which is they will never be satisfied because at the end of the day, the thing they're yearning for is the ability to sleep. They don't want government to look a certain way. They don't care about their wages or their health care or the walkability of their neighborhoods or anything like that. They don't even particularly care, to be honest with you, about anti-Semitism or homophobia or racism. Tons of homophobes watch Nick Fuentes. We all know he's gay. Tons of racists will nonetheless like cheer Kanye West, you know? Tons of white supremacists and nationalists were like, yeah, Kanye, base Kanye. They don't really care that much. It's not a strong principle for them. The hatred is real. I'm not saying they're faking the hatred. I'm just saying to them, it's all about a narrative, right? It's all an oorah. It's all a story. It's about the feelings that it gives them. They liked Kanye. They like Nick Fuentes. They like, all these people, whatever, because they like feeling like the TV screen is cheering them on. They want to see something that makes them feel powerful because normally they feel very disempowered, very emasculated, very humiliated. They feel like the world has taken from them all these essential parts of being, and because they're fundamentally detached from their humanity and the humanity of other people, they can only get that satisfaction from seeing it reflected out their television or computer screen. They're not looking for satisfaction in their real day-to-day life. In fact, a lot of these people will actively condemn each other for finding it. In online neo-Nazi incel communities, you get a lot of shit if you admit that you're seeing a girl or whatever. They don't like that. They all try to pull each other to this. The Videodrome, this is the medium through which you're meant to get that satiation. And it doesn't end with a particular set of policies or with the government being a given way. It wouldn't end with every black and brown person and Jewish person and so on being removed from the country, because then, of course, it would be about, it would just continue being about them. It's one of the reasons, one of my favorite anecdotes about like foreign racial politics is the fact that incels in South Korea, like the misogynistic incel types, are also obsessed with black dick. There are like no black people in South Korea. Like, Jesus, at least all the white racists who are obsessed with black dick and racial cuckoldry over here in America live in a country that has black people. There's a degree of proximity there. I don't think that justifies the obsession or any of the weirdness, but at the very least, there's proximity. In South Korea, there are like 10 black people, and most of them stay on the U.S. Army bases they're deployed to. These minds will create the grievances in the absence of any real ones to fixate on. As it turns out, it's a lot easier to adopt a worldview where your happiness and your satisfaction and your enthusiasm and your zealotry are driven by a narrative that you can watch happen from afar than it would be to have to address your problems like in your real life. If you externalize your source of happiness, you don't have to be as concerned. It doesn't matter if you work a cuck wagey job or if you have no real life friends, because you get to go home and watch based epic JD Vance own stupid libtards on Twitter. It doesn't matter that you haven't had sex in 3 years and that every time you talk to somebody who you're interested in, you flub out with them because you're unsociable and you have no idea how to communicate your interest to people. Because when you go home, you get to watch a compilation with a VHS filter over the top of ICE agents body slamming Hispanics who may or may not be illegal, but you can see their skin is brown. So, okay. Like, you get me, right? I don't know. You get me, right? That's what I'm saying here. Curtis Yarvin doesn't get it. There never was a dismantling. There never was an end state. You were never going to post so hard that the Republican Party anointed you Philosopher King of America. You were never going to be the vizier of a high IQ, techno-feudalist dystopian society where everyone bows down to an immortal prince. Shit was never happening, okay? Why did you pronounce compilation that way? Because I was like 27 syllables into that sentence, okay? And I misspeak when I'm 5 syllables into a sentence. I don't need to be prompted to misspeak. I do it for fun. Look at the camera, fake the disconnect. No, thank you. I will not subscribe to Curtis Yarvin Substack. They will never be happy. Is he leaving America? I believe in this article he says that he plans to. That he's making plans to leave the United States, yeah. I hope so. Well, it's not like it makes a difference to his exposure. Where to? I don't know. I'm not a Curtis Yarvin expert. I'm talking about the psychosexuality of fascism. At the end of the day, these people just want to feel cool because they're not. Hope Cassie Pritchard, one of the, lead advocates for the Starbucks union, doesn't mind my public acknowledgement. She does post very good. Another day of Vosh aggressively describing his own audience while describing fascists. Normally I'd take the cheap shot, but on this one I'll defend my audience. There are a lot of people in my audience who are pathetic, wretched even. This is true, undeniably so. However, and this is important, in a lot of these fascist online communities, the drive within the community and to the people they watch and everything, it's a death cult, There's no actual desire from any of these people to improve their lives, and nobody incentivizes them to do so. No one encourages them to do so. They talk about getting into lifting weights, not to make their lives better, but to fulfill some like masculine archetype, like the men ought to do this. It's not actually about living. It's just about fulfilling a role. They think the role is one they have to fulfill. They're antagonistic towards actual efforts to improve each other's lives. They hate that shit. They don't want to talk about it, for the same reason that incel communities don't. Not really the case here. I have never even once advocated for, people to become activists for the left at the expense of their own well-being. Quite the opposite. Usually when people say, ooh, I really want to get into protesting, I say, take care of your own life first. River. Come here. Cat break. Come here. Oh my God, you're so fat. You're so fat. You're so chumpy. Look at this. You're so chumpy. Not biting. No. Mwah. Oh, delicious.